Hello and welcome to the webinar titled Turbocharging Your Digital Transformation Journey with Low Code, presented by Newgen Software, a leading provider of a unified digital transformation platform with native process automation, content services, and communication management capabilities. I thank you all for the overwhelming response we have obtained for this webinar. I am Darpan and I shall be your host and moderator for this webinar. Today we have with us Mr. Leslie Joseph, the Principal Analyst with Forrester Research Inc, and Mr. Ritesh Varma, who is the Global Head of Business Consulting in Newgen Software. Leslie serves application development and delivery professional. His research helps AD&D pros understand how to plan and prepare for the propagation of automated intelligence with practical insights into the technology, platforms, and sourcing strategy. Ritesh is the Newgen Global Head of Pre-Sales, Business Solutioning, and Disruptive Consulting. He is an industry expert in utilizing technologies as BPM, RPA, analytics, ML, and in providing business viable solutions. Leslie will discuss on how the low-code platform can help organizations inch closer to their digital goals, and then Ritesh will come and talk about how Newgen's low-code transformation platform can help simplify complex business processes, enhance business agility, increase employee productivity, and reduce the time to market. At the end of the presentation, I'll be having a Q&A sessions. We request you to type your questions in the question window of your GoToMeeting anytime during the webinar, and I shall take them up at the end of the session. With that, I hand it over to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Darpan. If I can just move the slide ahead. Everybody, I hope you all are doing well. Thanks for joining. Just to set the stage, right? The last 18 months, tragic as they have been, have also been fairly transformational for businesses across the region and the world. We've all collectively sort of accelerated our push to digital. We've seen automation and digitization indeed become boardroom conversations. So I really wanted to start this conversation today by talking about software and how we develop it and what our relationship is to software, because all said and done, software today does have a preeminent and vital role to play in everything that your business does. Your approach to creating software is a vital part of who you are as a business. It's a major determinant of what we at Forrester call future fitness, which is essentially, if you think about it, your firm's preparedness to deal with the massive changes that lie ahead of us as we go through this pandemic and whatever it brings. As you know, we are still going through it and we don't know when it will end. So obviously this is a time of great change, and this importance of software, as it has especially manifested itself in the last 18 months or so, it has manifested itself in a few interesting ways that relate directly to future fitness, right? So the first is as it relates to creativity. Think about it. Your software really expresses your firm's DNA. And today, most firms who have been on this digital transformation journey for at least for half a decade, if not more, where they are is that they found themselves in this situation that we at Forrester call digital sameness. What's that now? So digital sameness is, if you think about it, if you look at any of the industries, any geography, take the top 5, 8 firms in that space, what you see is that they have been investing in the same things from a digital point of view, to the point where their behaviors, their tools, their customer front ends, everything is pretty much the same as their competitors. You behave in the same way as your competitors do. You use the same software tools that your competitors use. And often what happens is that these software suites that you've installed across your business, they try to impose their standardized sort of industry workflows on you. So your processes also really don't differentiate anymore. Your processes look the same as your competitors. They have the same inefficiencies that your competitors' processes have. We're in this sort of bind where the incremental value, either in terms of competitive value or in terms of consumer value, that is created by every incremental dollar spent on digital has actually been reducing. Too many firms are trying to solve the same customer problems with the same technology solutions. And that won't work, because that's not how you differentiate. You really have to use creativity to digitally express your values, your value proposition to your customers. And the software that you use, it is important because it, in a sense, expresses that creativity that your firm latently holds. So if you're using the same software that everybody else uses, obviously you're not being creative. The second idea that I want to throw out here, which relates to future fitness, is adaptiveness. What we've seen is that, especially over the last few years, radical change can get forced on us pretty much at lightning speed. Businesses that are really able to adapt, the ones that are able to change rapidly, those who are continuously optimizing their customer experiences and their operations to react to the kind of opportunities and threats that the environment throws at us. These are the ones that really have a competitive advantage. So if you think about how companies like Uber or Grab, for example, were really able to rapidly pivot away from ride sharing when that business kind of dried up at the start of the pandemic into food delivery and other things. Well, that's adaptiveness, and you can be an adaptive enterprise too, but a precondition is the fact that your software must support this need to be adaptive. It must enhance your ability to adapt. And then the third thing that I wanted to talk about in this context is resilience. Here also your leverage of software really plays a very important role, because what happened is that the pandemic has exposed this almost fatal reality around most firms' digital transformation roadmaps, which is the fact that all said and done, a lot of companies are still very reliant on paper, on spreadsheets, on manual processes to engage with their customers and to run their daily operations. So essentially, when the crisis struck, the result was a bit of a disaster because of this heavy dependence on people-oriented processes and manual processes. But the silver lining, interestingly, was the fact that firms who were using modern technologies like cloud and automation tools and low-code platforms, they were able to respond to this crisis better, primarily because they were very rapidly able to reconfigure themselves and make the new apps that they needed or adapt the ones that they already had. So being able to automate away from those manual business processes and those tools, and to flexibly build software in a very rapid, iterative, but essentially nimble sort of way, turned out to be absolutely critical. So clearly, how you develop software is indeed a very critical part of your technology strategy and, as I said, your future fitness. But then when you think about how technology leaders really think about their enterprise software needs, they typically end up framing this whole conversation as a build versus buy decision. Whereas in fact, instead of being this binary choice, firms actually have a whole spectrum of delivery options. And they've really had these for years and years. But coming back to the CIO lens or the technology leader lens, many of these individuals, these leaders, still tend to frame, at least in their thinking, the idea of build versus buy as this binary choice. And this is a bit of a faulty assumption, because the reality is that you can look at it from a packaged software lens, but the fact is that packaged software never really gets implemented without non-trivial amounts of customization and configuration, right? And buying a packaged solution at the face of it may seem less risky, but when you consider the added costs or how the coded customizations can deter upgrades in the future, the equation doesn't always balance out in your favor. Moreover, as I said before, packaged software often can lead to the digital sameness that we spoke about, because the inherent assumption with a lot of these tools is that there is nothing inherently unique or different about your business outside of the standardized sort of workflow. Now, this is not a rant against packaged software. In fact, packaged software still shines for a lot of foundational apps, as well as for some emergent application areas. But the point that I'm trying to make is that traditionally companies have been looking at bespoke software development as prohibitive and risky. And the reality today is that with cloud platforms, with open source software, with API service catalogs, with low code platforms indeed, and with modern development practices, what is happening is that all of these tools, A, they make custom development very practical and less risky, and B, they're also changing the dynamic around who within your organization can actually use these tools to create very effective and very strong software. So if you think about how this works, we like to frame the ways to develop modern software today and away from build versus buy towards falling into two main buckets. And we like to call it customize and compose, right? Customize really assumes that you start with a modern packaged application solution, which can either be a point solution app or an integrated suite, and then add configurations, extensions, and customizations to obtain the required solution, but not in a haphazard way, but in a structured sort of way. And then you've got compose, which is an approach that assumes that you start first with a software development platform, and then you start to add open source libraries, cloud services through APIs, or prepackaged visual components to obtain the required solution. And increasingly, what we see is that the need to be future fit, to become more and more future fit, is driving many firms to rethink this whole build versus buy conversation into a customize versus compose conversation internally. This need to deliver differential value through software and making software kind of the centerpiece of how work gets done is pushing the pendulum towards building software internally. And so even firms that have traditionally, historically preferred to buy solutions or to implement applications, packaged applications, are finding themselves really building like never before. And as I said, there are several trends that are leading to the increased viability of both these different kind of approaches, right? So on the customization side, for example, SaaS applications, if you think about a modern SaaS application as it exists today, they themselves are changing to become more modular, to become more recomposable. Meanwhile, the vendor side ecosystems have gained a lot of maturity. So many SaaS applications today, they come with a variety of software and services partnerships inherently built within their ecosystems to allow a ton of innovation and choice from your point of view. At the same time, software itself becoming more modular means that you as a buyer often have a lot more flexibility to demand better, often outcome-based financial terms instead of having to support the typical large upfront license fees or financial commitments. On the compose side, think about it. The reality is that nobody really has to build these large, complex apps from scratch today, because most development teams can really effectively stitch together a custom app using open source components, cloud services, everything that I mentioned before. But at the same time, low code and no code platforms have also matured to the point where they make development really easy and democratic, right? These products provide modeling and visual tools to create functionality. They promote reusability. They integrate data functions across different applications, and often really come out of the box with a range of application templates and accelerators to aid a variety of personas to create applications faster, easier, better, and in a more complex, less complex sort of way, in a less complex sort of way in the creation, but not in the capability of the applications that get created. So to sum it up, really, if you omit for a second the consideration of who builds the application, right? So whether it is your internal teams of pro developers or your business users, or maybe you use an outsourced system integrator or services firm, but independent of who does the work, you've got today 5 main ways in which teams can develop software, and these are depicted on the slide. But fundamentally, what you need to remember is that the whole build versus buy conversation is now a customized versus compose conversation, and increasingly there are the flexibility that this affords and the personas who can be involved in this process of building software has undergone a radical change over the last several years. So it is more accessible, democratic, and really more effective to think about software as something that you can compose or customize by yourself, irrespective of where your starting point is. So having said that, I want to shift gears and I want to talk about automation, because it's inherently one of the big reasons why you would go about trying to build software in easy, simple ways and democratic, accessible ways is to foster automation. And automation has been a very critical element, right, in everything that we do today. Because look, we know that work is broken. Enterprises have for decades been sort of chugging along with inefficient processes and data that's really been spread across multiple documents and spreadsheets and disparate databases. Many processes even today rely on these reams of paper, these disconnected applications. Instead of having streamlined, standardized, digitized, automated processes, what we really have is this whole hodgepodge of legacy, these process pathways that sometimes lead to nowhere, these 500 different ways of getting things done, fragmented software ecosystems, and really lots and lots of manual work. And never has this been so much of a problem as it has been in the last 6 quarters of the pandemic, where you were literally wrenched away from your business as usual and forced to rethink how you did things without the luxury of having people show up at office and sit in front of their system. So you had to rely on automation. And now the reality today is that we cannot function without automation. These are there are a couple of things that have become increasingly clear to most companies. One is the fact that we can't function without automation. And when I say this, I don't even mean this in a tactical way, right? Because what has been happening is that before the pandemic, a lot of the conversation around automation itself was about how could we take out some costs from the back office, or how can we remove or replace a few FTEs from certain business processes, full-time employees from business processes. Now the conversation has changed. It's more about business agility. It's more about, can we unlock new revenue streams using digitization and automation? It's about business resiliency. What happens tomorrow if something else happens and half our workforce needs to work from home? How do our business processes continue to run? How do we ensure that our digitization helps us in these situations rather than takes away from our ability to be close to work? So essentially, future fitness, right? Essentially, how do we look at software and how do we look at our equation with our processes and technology in a way that is beneficial to us in being able to foster resilience, adaptiveness, and creativity? The second thing that we're realizing is that the adaptable sort of technology building blocks that we need to drive this kind of automation, they are really more accessible today than they ever have been before. Obviously, which is not to say that they don't need work. They always need work. But that said, where we sit today, it's a bit of a crazy time to be in automation, right? In the whole automation space. And many of the technologies that come to mind when we talk about automation, they've been historically deployed sort of independent of each other in silos. Different teams running what we call islands of automation across the organization that use different technologies, different governance frameworks, and don't really work together. The coding standards, the way we develop automation software or automate processes using software has been completely fragmented across, both from a technology point of view as well as from an application point of view within the enterprise. And the reality is that today's these super fragmented paradigms of automation, they haven't really intersected with each other. And each of these tools, whether you talk about RPA or DPA or low code or iPaaS or workflow, whatever you might be considering, they seem to have a particular place in the pecking order of strategic value that companies want automation to deliver. For example, if you think about all the options and you put them, the automation options, the automation technology options, and you put them on this sort of ladder or this sort of pyramid as you see on the slide, and then you look at it from the bottom up, the bottom being the most tactical and the higher up being the most strategic. So think about it. At the bottom of the pyramid, you can start by just automating tasks, right? So let's say you just have a small data entry task and you go and apply an RPA bot on it and you automate it. These kind of things are pretty easily accessible today using RPA tools and so on. But then you do get to a point where you stop seeing just individual tasks and you start to realize that you're looking to automate an end-to-end process in a sort of a straight through end-to-end manner. So let's say you wanted to automate your entire order to cash process. Now that will not just require a robot, but it will require you to add certain IA intelligent automation components, like maybe NLP or maybe document or text analytics. Or maybe you might need to branch out in some processes to include a DPA tool or an iPaaS tool to integrate with third-party systems as well. So that's the second level, which is from moving from task to process. But then you can move up from there as well and look at automated business decisioning, which in this case might involve you having to do certain advanced data transformations before you're able to feed that data into a machine learning algorithm, or the use of bespoke AI components that you create, machine learning models that you train on your data and apply them here. So that's another level of automation, right? And the fourth level, which is interesting, is kind of looking at the entire complex job roles or process groups across your business and really applying things like design thinking or process intelligence to really identify and enact new ways of working and new ways of applying your business logic and applying your business functionality, creating new kinds of business models. So essentially, this is in the area of innovation, for example. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that as you ascend this pyramid and as automation and digitization become more and more impactful to the future fitness of your business, you have to take this broader view of automation, this novel view, this novel approach to software development, because these are the crucial components to help you turbocharge your transformation journey, and to think about how you ascend this pyramid and how you make automation more and more strategic, and how you make the way you develop software more core, more fundamental to how you transform your business, that's going to be really a decider of where you end up as you go through this journey. Now, having said that, if you think about the supply side or the vendor side, if you see where each of these automation technologies are headed, clearly, all the different kinds of process automation tools are converging. There is today, there are lots and lots of process automation tools that are available to you to enable both professional developer roles as well as kind of general purpose low code platforms that look at actually more of a spectrum of personas across business developers and professional developers to really deliver mid to large size data and process automation use cases without having to involve a lot of coding. So if you think about where no code and low code sits, or where digital process automation sits, there is a lot of convergence happening there. And RPA also has been trying to kind of wedge in here to allow largely professional developers, but also increasingly now business developers as well, to really create surface automations at the UI layer. But what we started to see over the last several years is that the low code and the no code guys have been moving into RPA and DPA territory by kind of improving their ability to market to professional developers, or maybe to strategically acquire capabilities in the RPA space or what have you. You've got the RPA guys who are kind of trying to expand all over the map, right? So they're trying to get into low code. They're including elements of BPM in their software systems. They're extending into process mining and AI and machine learning. And then you've got the DPA guys, the digital process automation guys, who have tools that are increasingly trying to get in and address smaller projects and expand things like data management features and things like that to become essentially more accessible to citizen developers and not just to pro developers. And all of this is leading to this sort of grand convergence, right, which you see on this chart. What the chart depicts is the kind of merger and acquisition activity that has been happening. The sort of the feeding frenzy that we have seen in the automation space over the last 3 to 4 years, with ISVs like Microsoft and SAP buying RPA companies like UiPath buying process mining and iPaaS vendors, low-code vendors coming all over the map and buying everybody else in the process. Even system integrators like IBM or a BPO like Sykes have been doing intense amounts of automation-focused merger and acquisition. And this convergence, this kind of mass coming together of automation technologies is actually in our benefit as users, because it is leading to what I am calling the automation fabric. Think of it for a second. The last decade or more of enterprise technology was defined by the application, right? So you had specialized packaged applications or bespoke software, if that was your style, for pretty much everything. So your ERP systems, your CRM systems, your supply chain software, your specialized vertical or collaboration suites or what have you, everything was really about the application. But what automation over the last few years has done, and what low code has done, and all of these different capabilities, is that it has, in a sense, unchained the creation of work or the execution of work from the applications that underlie work. Let me give you an example. There is a major retail chain that I talked to. What they've done is they've automated their entire and extremely complex warehousing operations, their distribution center IT setup. So they exist in an already very complex application landscape. But what they've done is they've abstracted this entire landscape to break it up into individual chunks of application functionality, like building blocks, which are essentially kind of like Lego pieces. And they've made these Lego pieces available to their business users to allow them to roll their own workflows as they might need to. And so the business user doesn't really need to care about how the underlying orchestration across these applications is actually going on. And that, mind you, is very, very complex. It's a mix of all the technologies that I mentioned in the pyramid slide. But from a business user perspective, none of this complexity matters. It's just this low code Lego block-like environment that has taken out all of the complexity, taken away the need for them to really know the dozens of applications and really be familiar with all of these 100 enterprise processes, or to know who to go to collect data of a certain kind. It's taken all of this away, and it's really reduced the distance between the individual worker in the distribution center and their work. And I have examples like this across financial services and others, where a lot of the complication that exists within the application landscape has been abstracted because of the automation layer. And really, this is the automation fabric. It is this layer of automation technologies kind of crisscrossing each other and aligning with each other, taking away, handing off from one to the other, that sits between the application layer and the people. And the people could be developers, they could be business users. And the layer where low code sits is kind of this creation layer. But increasingly, what is important to remember is that the automation fabric is where all of the fun stuff is going, right? So if you think about process, workflows, and insights, they are gravitating towards the fabric. Intelligence is getting injected within the fabric. Handoffs and work between humans and software bots, all of this is getting orchestrated within the fabric. So the way to think about where this is evolving is that if you've used iOS shortcuts on the iPhone, or if you've used a service like IFTTT, then the analogy is that essentially the automation fabric is like iOS shortcuts for the enterprise, just where the business users can really only focus on the functionality without needing to know a lot about the underlying application itself. And it's fair to say that today you can't go and buy yourself an automation fabric because these technologies are still co-evolving. But over the next 2 to 3 years, this is where sort of the world is headed. And as I was saying, low code or no code software forms a very important part of this fabric because it enables this broad democratization of software creation. It enables this sort of distribution of the benefits of automation across the company, enabled by your business users, by your business developers, your citizen developers, and by a variety of personas who are closer to the work, who are now empowered to create applications and create workflow for themselves, and therefore kind of connecting it up to the needs for you to use software to be more creative, more adaptive, and more resilient. You're giving everybody in the organization the tools to be able to take control of their own work, to be able to run automations, build automations, to build functionality based on simple tools rather than have to rely on IT or rely on some other part of the organization to get it done for them. And that's really the power of what happens when you democratize software creation, when you democratize workflow and process automation, all the way down to where the work actually gets executed, is that you have better engaged employees, you have better value through your processes, and overall you become kind of aligned with this automation first mindset across the organization, which then gets really interesting because that is kind of the first step towards this broader digitization, digital transformation. So all in all, these are really encouraging signs. And as we go through, the whole process, as low code and no code itself becomes more and more evolved and deeper integrated into the automation fabric, we are going to see that it makes increasingly more and more sense to recommend that you consider using these platforms as you plan and build out your next phase of digitization. So really, in terms of distinct recommendations, start thinking about the evolution of the automation fabric as a core part of your thought process. Use this thinking, this automation first mindset to prioritize an adaptable digital first approach to all of your business, and automate as much as you can, but also think about automation at two levels, as not just kind of just something tactical that you do to save a bit of cost here and there, but really as a more strategic part of your digitization process. And think about low code software as one part of this whole complex mass of essentially this this automation fabric, where your business people, your business developers, your citizen developers, people across the organization are empowered to really create value through software and therefore connect up to your digitization goals and make you more adaptive, creative, and resilient. So that's all I had. And with that, I want to turn it over to the next speaker. Ritesh, on to you.
Thank you, Leslie. That was quite insightful. Well, just taking a cue from there, Leslie, I hope my screen is visible. Okay. So the topic for today was turbocharging your digital transformation journey with low code. Leslie has given us a brilliant perspective of how we should look at these initiatives. How can tools be looking at the overall thing? I would just kind of continue from there and take it to the next level with, say, Uber and Amazon have just became a cliche today that everyone keeps on talking about it. Well, I would also take a minute or two just to talk about those. and take it to an overall level, where Uber was connecting passengers who needed a ride and drivers that were willing to serve them. There were no owned cars, no salaried drivers, just the right platform to connect. The result: successful business with happy customers, partners, and employees. On a similar level, we have the concept of Amazon. The Amazon is about how it perfected the concept of logistics, sellers, and buyers on the same platform. The whole concept was around customers, how to make it safe and fast purchase, and how to make it connected at an overall level. So Amazon and Uber are two brilliant examples of how the entire systems or the ecosystem was connected from an overall level to connect towards the customers. But Uber and Amazon are not kind of replicated at multiple levels. They are always there. They are always kind of, there are many less examples of Ubers and Amazons at an overall level. The secret sauce is in integrating the partners, customers, ecosystems, and employees together at an overall level. Where it really makes sense, or where it really makes a difference, is that both these organizations were able to connect the partners, customers, vendors, ecosystem, employees, all worked in tandem in order to work towards the customers. So that's the secret sauce that was for them. But it's not so simple. There's a lot that comes into perspective as we move along. There are managing complex processes, regulatory compliances, document-centric operations, and customer communication is important at the end of the day. And this has to be done in an overall perspective of faster competition, responding faster to competition, responding to changing business needs, and evolving customer expectations. So these are the variables that we need to kind of work more in order to make things happen. Now, this is a brilliant example of where connected can really make a difference. So if we look at a traditional, if we try and map out the complexity of business processes and information, at one spectrum we have simple information, and the other we have complex information. On one spectrum we have complex business processes, and the other we have departmental or complex business processes. So the spectrum is actually wide. So if we look at the overall thing, if we map it from the extreme bottom right hand side to the top half of right hand side, we look at a traditional strong content management platform playing over here. We have a low code application playing over here, but for complex business processes and complex information, we have the concept of truly digital transformation platforms that need to come into place in order to make it happen. Let's look at so complex business needs actually require more comprehensive platforms in order to make it comprehensive, in order to make it complete. So at one end, we have business initiatives in terms of customers and employee experiences, which need mobile, portal, collaboration, and self-service to come into picture. We need AI, ML driven, analytics driven intelligence to come into picture. We have rapid digitization of business applications, which can be done on low code application development platform, microservices, and DevOps comes in handy over there. Modernization of IT infrastructure, which comes in from modern content and communication processes, process automation, and the likes. And web services, open APIs, and others comes in handy over there at an overall level. In order to make things happen, we need a secured, uninterrupted remote operations to all work in tandem in order to make it happen, which is supported by cloud and hybrid deployments, platform and application monitoring at an overall level. So all these need to come in together in order to make a unified platform which can serve complex business needs. That's the bottom line of things. So at the end of the day, we saw all of this to be there. But what differentiates or what becomes a game changer is connecting your enterprise to the entire ecosystem, to the customers and for the customers. So this is promoted by the concept of Newgen 1. What it basically means that the customer content services, low code automation, customer communication all come in together in order to make things happen. And that's where it becomes very, very effective. So this platform has been highly recognized by Gartner and Forrester uh, as a strong performer in the latest reports. Now, coming back to what makes Newgen 1 stand out is the unique perspective that we bring across to the table, where the focused and professional IT developers for agility and productivity. So the whole system does not only cater to the citizen developers, but it caters aggressively to the professional IT developers as well. The domain expertise that we carry across to the entire system kind of brings it a completeness perspective in the overall sense, and it's supported well by the global SI partnerships for reach and scale. So what it brings to the table is a comprehensive platform which is built for scale, for connecting the various enterprises together. Let's look at a typical example of connected banking. Now, a bank operates in a multitude of ways, which basically means that there are people in terms of credit heads, underwriters, risk analysts, front office people working in tandem with functions in marketing, customer service, finance, compliance, and others. There are processes as lending, onboarding, trade, payments, and credit cards, and systems all working together for improving growth and reducing costs. On one side, we have the extended banking ecosystem like fintechs, aggregators, merchants, suppliers, and channels. And the other end, we have the ecosystem or the boundaryless banking through employees, customers, and partners. All are working in tandem for the customer. The whole customer journey needs to be kind of worked on in order to make it complete. Now, I have a very, very interesting example where people in the name of digital transformation or organizations in the name of digital transformation may build a fancy portal, may build a fancy app and say that I've digitally transformed that the way that I work on things, which is usually not the case until the point I kind of marry the front end and the back end perfectly, the front end channels to the back end processes perfectly. This would not work. This would not kind of make it happen. Now that is what differentiates Newgen 1 in order to kind of bring on the complete journey from the front end to the back end process together. The Newgen 1 platform brings in the business applications for lending, account opening, and trade finance and payments together for multi-user experience, intelligent automation, low-code application development, business process automation, and the likes through an integrated ecosystem and a cloud deployment. So it's ready to use on day one through the entire system as such. But why connected banking and why now? As Leslie mentioned, everything has been disrupted today. So till probably 2 years back, what was supposed to be digital in an overall sense was how your executive one can walk up to a particular house, do a KYC over there, click photographs, and onboard a customer. However, in today's times, everything has changed. What people now don't expect is that people walking up to someone's house and click a photograph and they be seated and doing all those things. So COVID has changed a lot of things for yourself. What in effect has changed is that even the compliance or the local regulatory frameworks have changed. So for this example, for example, the compliance framework has changed in order to apply or take into consideration the video KYC of things. So video KYC is something that is seeing prominence. So let's look at a journey where, let's take Sarah as how she goes through an emotional roller coaster ride while just applying for a loan. So something which as simple as a personal loan can really be hectic if not addressed correctly. So Sarah wants to kind of apply for a loan. She wants a loan. So she's hopeful for kind of seeing the loan, kind of thinking on what else she can do, finding the offers in place and things like that. So Sarah is excited. She starts the loan application journey in excitement, which turns into anxiety as she starts filling it up on the mobile phone. However, she finds it too cumbersome and starts filling the application on the laptop. She is eager in terms of she gets a reply back from the bank saying that the application has been received. So she is really eager to kind of see what happens next and when can I get my loan and how I can work on it. It turns into annoyance as she doesn't kind of is not allowed to kind of fulfill all the tasks, and paperwork requires her to visit a branch nearby. She is really frustrated as irregular updates are there from the bank. She doesn't kind of see what's happening. The anxiety kind of takes it to a further level. She just sees in process for a lot of time. There's a lot of exasperation in terms of asking for additional documents, income statements, this and that, in order to make it complete. She develops a concept of mistrust, and finally it all ends up in disappointment. So something that was started from hope to excitement finally becomes a game changer for you because she doesn't kind of bank with you any longer. What we have seen, or what the research shows, is that 50% of the banking customers apply for credit cards online, completing the application. So online seems to be one of the most preferred ways of doing things. However, most of the applications that are applied online do not usually convert into successful customers. The whole reason is that the marriage of the front end to the back end process is not perfect. Let's look at how lending with connected banking would work in the new scenario with the low code platform integrated with content management and customer communication management. So Sarah is a millennial. Again, she needs a loan. Sarah researches on the loan offers online. She consults family and friends. Now, the biggest influences for any banking relationship to work is the consultation with banking with family and friends, and that's what's most important. Sarah applies for a loan through mobile. She kind of adds documents, so she doesn't need to visit a branch. It can be done totally online. We can also build on the concept of video KYC that's coming in today. Sarah gets personalized deals and offers to her specific needs. She can switch to any device, it's device agnostic, receives a video consultation with loan officers in order to kind of advise her with the right loan. She receives real-time status, receives loan approval in minutes, and everything is hunky-dory. So something which starts with hope, excitement, the whole thing continues to an escalated path, and ultimately Sarah becomes a loyal customer with yourself. What happens behind the scene is that a lot of this platform of Newgen One comes in handy in order to make things happen for them. So she needs a loan. Sarah's loan interest and other things, or probably a profile, is taken through social analytics. She is engaged early. Preemptive loan offers on Sarah based on actionable insights. So a lot of analytics is going in the back end for this intelligent automation to come into place. The mobile app and the responsive portal work in tandem so that the device independence is established. The auto-filling of loan documents is done using the documents that have been uploaded, like the ID card, like the tax statements or income statements and the like. So everything is done in a straight through kind of a manner, and this whole thing is orchestrated on a low code Newgen platform. So the beauty, as Leslie was mentioning, is that the whole system doesn't need to be built. It just needs to be composed for the right solution to work together. Newgen One just simplifies things. It is a business process automation for orchestrating this omni-channel experience across business silos. It has a contextual content services platform for taking documents, understanding documents, and then keeping it part of the process. The customer communication services platform enables the customer to be engaged at regular intervals. Intelligent automation and analytics allow a lot of background checks to be done on the customer and provide the right insightful data for them to work upon. And finally, all this is done on a low code development with no requirements for coding as such, unless it needs to be integrated. The real-time access to context through process is provided by the system as such. So you can understand the mode or the role of Sarah while she is kind of working on the entire thing. The automation of data from documents, innovation and agility for faster and rapid turnarounds, knowledge worker empowerment. This is most important. So what you're doing now is enabling underwriters with knowledge from all over in order to make right, quick decisions which are apt for business. And proactive management of risk and compliance is done through the overall thing. So loan is one thing that we all understood. So this becomes most critical. So Newgen One digital transformation platform is a unified platform which allows native process automation, content services, and communication management capabilities. Its globally successful enterprise rely on Newgen One to rapidly develop and deploy complex, content-driven, customer-engaging business applications on cloud. And finally, it's all about unlocking simple with speed and agility. Thank you. And we will stay in touch. Definitely, you can write to me or probably let me know where I can be of assistance. Thanks a lot for your time today, and thank you.
Thank you, Ritesh. Thank you, Leslie. We now move on to our Q&A session. So our first question of the day is for you, Leslie. Low code or no code? What is the way to go for enterprise apps?
That's a good question. I think it has to always be a combination. The reality is that when you talk about no code, nothing is always really no code, and there is the risk that you may start with no code, but very rapidly you might end up in high code because the capability that you were trying to, or the functionality that you were trying to create using the no code software wasn't somehow able to deliver the capability that you were trying to build, and then all of a sudden you are in the middle of code. So it's very important to select a platform that allows you the flexibility to move up and down in the ladder in a scaled sort of fashion, so that you can progressively move from no to low code if required, and not all of a sudden realize that you suddenly have a massive JavaScript that you're in the middle of. So it depends on what you're trying to do, but the answer for the most part is usually scale easily between low and no code rather than just either or.
All right, thank you. So our second question is for you, Ritesh. That is, what are the most common pitfalls for low code implementation?
Thank you, Darpan. As Leslie mentioned, that entirely everything cannot be no code. So code is required for kind of building complex applications, at least from a perspective of integration with the third-party systems like ERPs, core banking, or integrating it into the ecosystem. The most common pitfalls from an overall implementation, as we look at it, is for underestimating the requirement as such, and then understanding that everything can be done without coding at all. So that's true to a certain extent with simple departmental processes. Remember the matrix that we drew for simple to complex and low to high data requirements. So in that, the first quadrant can be at least addressed by those, but we have to now break it down into smaller pieces so that everything can be kind of built on a no code or a low code platform in an agile manner, taking it MVP by MVP in order to make things happen for you.
If I may just add, so taking a leaf from the automation fabric idea and seeing how these things have typically progressed across hundreds of organizations that I speak to, so my belief is that there are kind of three pitfalls along the path to scale, and that this applies for automation as well as for low code. But the first is fairly early on, when you're essentially trying to prove the value of the concept and essentially prove to yourself using a POC or what have you, or even simple development of your first set of automations or your first set of applications that you're developing. You're trying to establish capability, establish viability, and establish ROI, so business cases and ROI, and deliver something that is actually aligned to your requirement. So that's the first level. And once you go beyond the first level is where the fun starts, because now you're starting to scale up. You're starting to bring more and more people from across the organization to develop applications, create automations. And that's where, as a pitfall, kind of governance becomes really critical, right? Because this is where you run the risk of having shadow IT form across your enterprise, or you run the risk of having suboptimal code get developed through low code, suboptimal applications that have poor internal standards, poor security models, and so these kind of things you need centralized or federated capability to address and manage, and to effectively govern the development and delivery of software that is created using low code models. And there is a bit of a tension also here that comes across, because you've got your big format IT development, and then all of a sudden you're asking them from a cultural point of view to now support all of these different people sitting in the business functions or in smaller parts of your organization that all of a sudden now have the capability to build or roll their own applications and so on. So that governance and that tension that you need to bridge between these two organizational muscles, that becomes really critical. And then, of course, as you scale past this, the question becomes, how do you kind of democratize this even further and make inherent low-code thinking or automation first thinking pervasive across your entire organization, so that it's not just a handful of elite that are controlling this, but everybody has the opportunity to make a difference in the way that they work using the tools that you provide and the controls that you have available. So I think it's a multifaceted answer. There's no one thing, but I think if you think about it along the path to scale, then these are the three pitfalls that you need to watch out for.
Thank you, Leslie. That was really, really insightful.
Thanks, Leslie. Our next question is for you, Leslie. What type of organizations are opting for low code? What are they looking for, and what are the risks of no code and low code?
I think today it's difficult to point to a specific class of organizations and say that here's where low code adoption largely resides, because I've seen a variety of different organizations opt for the capability and actually accelerate application development internally using this. Whether you look at it from a vertical point of view or whether you look at it even geographically, there is a good spread. And I think what has been interesting is that even the availability of the capability across not just the dedicated software vendors, but that the capability getting developed inherently within a variety of even ISVs and software suites for citizen developers or business users to kind of engage deeper with the software and the functionality and build their own capability has permeated quite a lot of enterprise suites today. So it's a fairly widespread market, and it's poised to grow quite significantly. We ourselves have data and analysis for how the market is supposed to grow, and it's not mean at all. It's a pretty good state of growth. From a pitfalls and gotchas point of view, again, it comes back to those three roadmap choke points that I talked about. Is that you do have to worry about making sure that there is a plan, first of all, because otherwise you're just leading to tons and tons of shadow IT and islands of development across the organization that can grow quite unfettered and can become a big mess once it attains scale. So you want to invest early in governance, in education, in establishing the right kind of guardrails and finding that right balance, whether it is through a COE structure or something else, between kind of IT and the business groups that are actually in the thick of implementing things and are actually building out these applications and these automations for themselves, so that it's really a sense of ownership across the organization that you feel for whatever is getting created, rather than just these independent, disconnected islands of automation and islands of application development. I don't know if that's addressed your question, because the question itself is a 1-hour conversation, but I just wanted to give you a taste.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. Our next question is for you, Ritesh. Do you think the connected enterprise is actually possible?
Well, it's all about the mindset, Darpan. It is entirely possible, and many enterprises who are successful in doing business have adopted this. So what I feel is that today it's more than possible. It's a hygiene factor. Everything that people are doing or enterprises are doing are for a customer. Those customers can be internal, they can be external, but everything around them has to be done. And connected enterprise is the core motive towards a low code platform as well. So if you look at it, there's a mobility device, there's a portal, and multiple ways of capturing things. So those can be the starting point, but it has to be threaded together into the process in order to connect the various actors together. So it's entirely possible.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is that, has COVID changed things for a low code perspective? And Leslie and Ritesh, any of you can take this up.
Leslie did cover that. I think, Leslie, I think you can start and I can add on to it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate what I said, what COVID has done across the board is that it has, to at this point, this is a bit of a cliche, but to paraphrase what Satya Nadella said at the beginning of, I guess, sometime in the middle of last year, is that we've seen companies undergo 3 years worth of digital transformation in 3 months. And a lot of the, well, let me put it this way. We've had various reasons in the past for why companies have not or chosen not to adopt modern technologies, not opt for the cloud, not adopt the next phase technologies from a transformation point of view, of which low code is one. Uh, with the pandemic being as severe and as sudden and as disruptive as it turned out to be, a lot of these companies that were sitting on the fence, or even companies that never thought that they might even ever need to consume these kind of capabilities, like, for example, if you think about the Middle East as a geography, or if you think about those that smaller, I would say 500 million to $1 billion revenue range of companies, or maybe 1 to $5 billion range of companies that had relatively smaller ambitions from a application development and automation point of view, they all of a sudden really woke up and said, if not now, then when? And so I think it's been a crazy moment um, for this entire space, to be honest. And it's what it has done is that it has made a lot of more newer kinds of companies try it out for the first time and then get hooked. So I think the citizen development model, the business development, the business uh, user model is only going to go up, up, up from this point on.
Yeah. Yeah, COVID has changed a lot of things. In fact, the need for a low code, no code kind of a system is much more felt today rather than any time else. So people have, or organizations have started to kind of look at these systems much more aggressively now. And in fact, Middle East, Africa, India, APAC are all very human intensive kind of places. So you depended a lot on human interchanges of information. You could walk up to a finance person and submit your bills there and get paid. But with everything going down and everything being remote, those things changed. And I think that's where you can quickly and rapidly build applications and deploy it. One of the most successful things that I've seen with low code happening is deployment of the system for a PPP program, Paycheck Protection Plan, in the US, where the plan got announced on 26th of March 2020, and by 1st of April, we were able to prepare a system and roll it out for adoption by 10th of April by around 22 banks in the US. So that's the power of low code that you can actually bring to the table for quickly kind of deploying it, making it happen in a business scenario.
Thank you, Ritesh. Thanks, Leslie. Our next question is for you, Ritesh. That is regarding the Newgen One platform. Is it possible for someone to have, some modules of the Newgen One and not entirely the complete platform?
Yeah, so Newgen One platform, as I mentioned, comprised of three parts: the automation, the intelligent automation, the document or the content services, and the customer communication management. All these are modular in nature and can be bought separately. We kind of wish to expand on the existing infrastructure or the systems that the enterprise would be having and complement it to an overall level.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question. Is low code in any way related to open technologies that allow interoperability? So I think we have already gone through that. Would like to re-answer that. And moving on then, I suppose we have passed our allotted time. So there's one more question. I would just like to take it up with Leslie. That how important is Compose for business apps?
How important is Compose for business apps? I think it's extremely important from a business application point of view. So if you think about most of the direction in which the major enterprise application suites are going today, there's this realization that it's not enough um, to just provide the application or the workflows predefined, but it's more and more important to allow users to create and have a say in how they get work done. So if you think about an SAP or if you think about a Microsoft, Microsoft Dynamics allows significant amount of, so the whole philosophy, the application philosophy itself is revolving around the fact that you keep the core intact and then you customize around the edges. And so they've implemented and provided people with things like Power Apps or Power BI to be able to extend effectively without messing with the core, but to be able to compose on top of a consistent and robust core. So if you just think about where software is headed, not just, and I don't just mean this in the context of enterprise software that you create or I create internally, but if you think about the big enterprise suites that were usually these monoliths for years and years, they're increasingly moving towards a certain level of composability to give a lot of the extensibility. So each of them has a very strong and clearly defined extensibility model. A lot of it is not just about extending just that functionality, but also extending into other adjunct adjacent software suites and capability areas that can allow for kind of bringing to essentially compose your own application from the sort of the functionality building blocks, whether they reside within the suite itself or whether they come from outside using APIs or whatever else. So I think Compose is going to be a very big motion for most business applications. It already is, to be fair, and that is only going to deepen as software becomes more and more democratic. Look, the key takeaway here is that software inherently wants to democratize. Software development inherently is becoming more and more of a democratic tool that everybody has access to and can leverage. And so everybody in the ecosystem is essentially following the same in different ways, but the overall journey is kind of the same.
Agreed. Compose is definitely going to be the next step in order for enterprise softwares to kind of come in. That's a given.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Ritesh. I'm afraid we are already out of our time now. So thank you, Leslie. Thanks, Ritesh, for your valuable insights. Thank you to the entire audience for your time and your tremendous response. We shall be sending across the presentation and the transcript for all the questions to you. Goodbye and have a great day ahead. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Darpan.
Thanks, Ritesh. Thanks, everyone.